Relative clauses are subordinate clauses that contain information and descriptions of people, animals, and things. You could compare them with these classic English tea time biscuits. You can think of the basic flatbread part of the biscuit as the basic sentence. The jam and icing sugar add information to the biscuit, just like a relative clause adds information to a sentence. There are two different types of relative clauses, defining and non-defining ones. First, let's look at the defining relative clauses. You could also call them necessary relative clauses. They give the sentence crucial information. Without them, you wouldn't really understand the meaning. Comparable with the jam, apricot, raspberry, or strawberry, it gives the biscuit its distinguishing flavor. Without it, you wouldn't get the whole biscuit experience, now would you? Let me give you an example. It was my grandma who made these biscuits. The relative clause tells us what my grandma did. Without that information, that sentence would be incomplete and you could misinterpret it. Non-defining relative clauses, on the other hand, give extra information, but you could understand the sentence without them. Just like with the powdered sugar. It adds a little extra taste to the biscuit, but it would work without it as well. Like this. My grandma, who is 83 years old, made these biscuits. To understand who made the biscuits, you don't necessarily need to know how old my grandma is. But it may be nice to know. In the written sentences, you may have noticed something that gives away which kind of relative clause is which. A non-defining relative clause is always separated by commas. In a defining clause, there are no commas. Another thing you may have noticed, relative clauses are always introduced by specific words, so-called relative pronouns. These are who, which, that, whose, and whom. Which one you use depends on what you're describing with the relative clause. Who is used for describing people, like in our example with my grandma before. Which for animals or things. That for people, animals, and things. Whose when describing ownership or possession. And whom for people and things. But beware, you only use whom when the immediate next word is not a verb. Like in, my grandma is the grandparent whom I like the most. In all other cases, you would use who. Notice how the relative pronoun always comes directly after the word it is referring to. This means that in a sentence, the relative clause can either be in the middle or at the end of the sentence. My grandma, who is 83 years old, made the biscuits. Here it stands in the middle and refers to my grandma. My grandma made the biscuits that I love very much. Here the relative clause stands at the end of the sentence and refers to the biscuits. Using relative clauses enhances your English skills and makes you sound more like a native speaker. In theory, you could also convey the contents of relative clauses in an extra sentence, like, my grandma made the biscuits. She is 83 years old. Using a relative clause is more elegant though. To sound even more like a pro speaker, you can sometimes shorten the relative clause. That is the case when the relative pronoun is not the subject of the sentence. Then you can leave out the relative pronoun. Like this. These are the biscuits that my grandma baked yesterday. Becomes, these are the biscuits my grandma baked yesterday. This structure is called a contact clause. Often this makes it a little easier to understand the sentence and is easier on the speaking flow. Let's recap. Relative clauses add meaning to sentences. Defining relative clauses convey crucial information that you need for understanding the sentence. Non-defining relative clauses add non-essential information that isn't necessary for understanding the sentence. They always come directly after the word they are referring to, either in the middle of the sentence or at its end. Relative clauses are always introduced by a relative pronoun. Which one exactly is determined by who or what the relative clause is referring to. What's your favorite biscuit? Write us a comment below and make sure to check out our extra material.